Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Sassy Smith, whose bio I have completely misplaced. Here it is. Sassy is a revolution in the world of personal coaching. As the founder of the Aphantasia Coaching Academy and a pioneering force in neurodiversity, she's transforming the way coaches approach their neurodivergent clients. Her unique journey began in 2015 when she discovered that she has aphantasia, a neurological condition that prevents her from visualizing images in her mind. This put her on a voyage of discovery, uncovering the other little known but significant differences in the way her mind works. During this time, Sassy suffered from a complete nervous breakdown and found out that many counselors and therapists are not equipped to support people like her. It sparked her mission to raise awareness about these conditions and to ensure that others like her can receive the therapeutic support they need. With an extensive background in leadership, coaching, and women's health, she offers a unique perspective on neurodiversity that is backed by personal experience and research. Thank you so much for being here and sharing such an important topic. And having such a wonderful name.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's always lovely to meet people who are open to helping me spread the word and raise the profile. And yes, I should confess that Sassy is not my given name. Hope that's not going to disappoint you.
I had, a part of me thought it must be a nickname, but I was hoping and rooting that it was just your given name.
So I guess in a way it was given to me by my friends. So, and it's a name that I've kind of stuck with for a very long time. So yeah, if most people call me Sassy unless they're telling me off, or you're my mum.
People call me Sassy too. I have a Sassy. Before we came live, you were talking about the number of people in the United States with this condition. So let's just start there.
Yeah. So aphantasia is thought to be around 3.9 to 5% of the population. So if we put that in terms of world population, that's 395 million. But if we look at the US alone, talking about 16.5 million people who are likely to have aphantasia. Now, my personal thought is that as we discover more about this, as people learn more about it, those figures might go up. But because there's been such small pockets of research at the moment, we're at this sort of 3.9 to 5%. If we also put that in a bit of context with adult ADHD, so I think the World Health Organization, last time I checked, was saying that they thought the adult population with ADHD was around 2.84%. So potentially more people with aphantasia than there are with adult ADHD, but they are sort of linked in a way because lots of people with ADHD have aphantasia, or they have some of the other conditions that fit alongside aphantasia. Aphantasia is like the tip of a bigger iceberg, really. And it only got its name in 2015, which is why nobody's ever heard of it.
I don't think people know what it is.
No.
I've been in Colorado 10 years. I had private practice in Michigan long before that. But if you are in a clinic or a professional, it's on diagnostic forms. If you bill insurance, it's on there, but I don't even know if professionals know what it is. I think they look over it and just don't check it. I really don't think it's talked about.
No, but the fact it's on a form is amazing in itself.
It's always, I know it's been there when you are checking symptoms at any type of an intake with a client, but do all professionals know what it means? Are they asking the questions when they're doing intakes?
Well, here's the thing. Chances are, if you have aphantasia, you might not even know you have aphantasia, because I went through, 2015 was when I discovered that I had it. So I have spent my whole life up to 2015 thinking that when people said they could see images in their minds, it was just a concept. So every time I did a meditation and I was, guided to a beach, I would think, well, that's okay. I live by a beach. I know what a beach looks like. Completely had my mind blown by the fact that, oh, people are actually doing that in their heads. They're actually taking themselves to a beach. They can see the beach. For some people, their visual imagery is so vivid that actually not only are they seeing the beach, but they're hearing the waves, they're feeling the sand under their feet, they're smelling the salt water or the suntan lotion or all of these things. And I'm just sitting here in my little darkness thinking these are just concepts. And so often when we talk to people about visualizing, people say, of course I can visualize. And it's only when you unpick and you say, so if I was to ask you to close your eyes and see an apple, are you seeing the apple or do you just know what an apple is? And it's only when you start to unpick it that people think, oh, hang on a minute. Am I seeing it or do I just know it's the thing? So it's a really interesting one from the point of view that there are so many people that have it that have no idea that they have it. And when you start thinking about some of the other things that come with it, which being one of the biggest ones, if you don't mind me kind of moving on to, is what's called severely deficient autobiographical memory, or SDAM. I just thought I had a rubbish memory. I just thought, it was really bad. Turns out I just can't access those memories. The memories of my life that are all around life events, my autobiographical memory, my episodic memory, it's there. I just can't access them. So it's a bit like, for the visualizers out there, if you were to imagine that your memories were in a filing cabinet in your head, my filing cabinet is locked and I haven't got the key for it. So my memories are there. I just can't access them. And so you start to kind of layer on things that this realization that, oh, so other people, not only can they visualize, but they can access, they can step into all these wonderful memories of their lives. And I have no access to them. And that, I think, for me, is kind of the biggest challenge with these conditions, because I can lose people quite easily out of my life, because I can forget the things that we've done together if I'm not in contact with them regularly. I can't see them in my head. And because I don't have an internal monologue, which is one of the other things that sometimes comes along, I'm never going to hear their voice again. So it's really interesting that I didn't know that I was any different to anybody else.
And sports uses, coaches use visualizing as a technique with athletes. Coaches use visualizing as a technique, and it's never even brought up.
No.
It's just assumed that everyone is capable and able to do this technique.
See yourself do it, putting the basket, getting the ball in the basket. See yourself doing this, see yourself doing that. And we know that the evidence is out there that says that when you combine visualizing with actual practical work, you get better performance results. Think about children learning maths. Now, when I learned maths, you had to evidence longhand, you had to show it on paper that you'd done it. Now, from what I understand, children are told to do that on the blackboard in their head. Well, if you are a child who can't visualize, that must be pretty challenging. It's really tricky when we've got these ways of teaching children without having an understanding of what doesn't work for them, and because aphantasia is so little known about, I think there potentially is a bit of a barrier. I mean, think about creative writing. So for me, I love to read. Not everybody with aphantasia does, but I absolutely love to read. But I'm not particularly interested in the descriptions. I just want the story. Because the descriptions are irrelevant, because I'm not creating the movie. I'm not looking and designing in my head the characters based on the descriptions. I'm just reading the story. And so if you're then being asked to creatively write something, you're potentially more likely to just skip the descriptive stuff, because all we're interested in is the story. And so I have seen on the forums, that parents saying, my child is really struggling with descriptive writing, and the teachers don't seem to understand it's because his brain doesn't automatically go there because the description is not relevant to him. And so there are some challenges, but I'm 54 and I've done pretty well in my life. So it's not held me back as far as I can tell in any way. Of course, I'll never know what I could have been if I could have visualized. But hey, none of us ever know.
And it shouldn't be your responsibility. I've been having these conversations about grief and loss, and clients will come to me, and I went through it.
Yeah.
When you're first going through it and you are having these limitations and these struggles, you truly think you're going crazy.
Yeah.
And you say to someone else, is this normal? Am I losing my mind? And the world doesn't discuss it. But you at least have other people discussing grief who you can say, did this happen to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm frustrated that there's at least more conversations about grief where we can recognize, okay, we have each other. We're not crazy. This is what happens. We're in shock.
Yeah.
There are no conversations. So kids have no frame of reference, no one else to say, is this happening to you too?
Yeah. And here's the thing with aphantasia and grief. So I've already said that I can, because I've got SDAM as well, I can lose people out of my life really easily. So when somebody passes, I may not grieve for as long as other people. And what I know is that's because it's not because I didn't love them any less. It's because, it's not that I did love them any less. It's because I don't see their face anymore and no longer hear their voice anymore. I lose my life with them. So that's gone pretty quickly with SDAM. And so I'm not in a grief state because I'm not ruminating over all the things that we did together, because I can't access them. And one of the common things that I see in the forums when it comes to aphantasia is grief is that people feel guilty because everybody else thinks we're cold because we've got over it. And it's not that we've got over it. It's just that that's how our brains work. And that kind of ties into one of the other things that can come with these conditions, which is having almost like muted emotions. And it's a touch of alexithymia, which is the inability to recognize and name emotions in other people, but also feel, recognize and name emotions in ourselves. And so when you kind of start linking this all together, there is a risk that people can come across as emotionally cold or just flatlining. And it's, we don't have the ability to step into those wonderful memories and have that wash of feelings that you get when you step into those wonderful memories. And so grief is quite challenging. I remember when my stepfather died and I was distraught for a couple of days. And then it was life as normal. And it was that quick. No, of course it wasn't, because we all know, and you know this, with grief has this wonderful way of kind of coming up and smacking you in the face just when you think you're okay. And so I would still get that every so often, and I'd get this kind of, oh, that is heavy. There's something missing. There's something missing in my life. Somebody's missing. And so I would still experience that. And when I talk about him and when I think about him, I can re-experience, those feelings of loss, that he's no longer in my life. But the actual process of grief, of feeling grief, I think is very different, certainly from my experience about it.
And so I'm thinking of my dad teasing me through movies. It used to drive him nuts because my job is to look at behavior and to analyze, right? Like I would be able to recognize and predict an ending, and it would bother him.
All the time. I do it all the time.
Right. And so, but teachers aren't trained that way.
No.
What can we be doing? What can we be doing better? How can we help educators look for this? They don't have one student. They're watching 35 at a time.
Yeah.
And we need to, because people are suffering and they don't even, like you said, they don't know that they have something that they could be taught differently, right?
Yeah.
It's the adult's job, it's the teacher's job to teach differently because no one learns the same way. But we aren't even identifying the students who need to be taught differently too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of identification and changing of methods for children who are autistic and have ADHD. Now, as a result, they are potentially picking up children who have aphantasia and have SDAM and have these other different ways, neurological ways of thinking and processing, because there are some links. So there are chances are that they are picking them up, but not every child with aphantasia will have anything else. There will be just those children who just can't visualize. And I think the start really is this raising awareness. It's about having these conversations, and then somebody watching this having a conversation and a light bulb going off and saying, oh my God, you mean people can actually visualize? And then they have a conversation, and that sparks a conversation, and that sparks a conversation, and eventually it gets into the school system. And that's the only way it can happen. Unfortunately, it is the only way it can happen. Now, having said that, I have completely forgotten the name of the state, but there is somewhere in the States who last year had a recognized aphantasia awareness day. So it's starting to kind of creep out. We'll have a national at some point.
It's so true that I remember raising my hand at a Jack Canfield training day saying, I think I'm doing it wrong. And I remember him saying, close your eyes. And it's so funny that you used an apple. And he said, imagine you're in a car. Imagine you open the glove box. What do you see? And I said an apple. But I can't tell you if I really saw it or I just was playing the game. I can visualize. I can get there. But I don't think it's as easy for me as many others. I think I have to do a lot to get myself to a place. And I think that's true for a lot of people. I think meditation and I think it's a lot of work and practice. And we talk about it as if it's simple. And a lot of people think I'm just doing it wrong and give up. And so even this conversation, even if you can visualize, I don't think it's simple or easy or as even tuning the other things out. I think it takes a lot of work. I think it can be done a lot of different ways. And we make it seem like athletes just do it and then their shooting improves and we can all just close our eyes and do it very simply.
Yeah. And the reality is the visualization is on a scale. So it's the Fantasia scale. And you have hyperphantasia at the top end, and that's for those people who can really vividly visualize, and those are the people who can hear and smell and feel, and that's my husband, hyper visualizing. And some people can project their visualizing. Then we got aphantasia at the bottom, people who can't, like me, at all. And everybody else is somewhere in the middle, this scale of nothing to wow. And so we all sit on this scale of, and so I think for those people who like you were saying that you have to work at it, that is probably somebody who is on the lower end of the scale, not quite aphantasia, but the lower end of the scale. And that's how it, how it works with a lot of these things with the scale, like on a spectrum. But it was interesting you said play the game, because one of the things that I've realized is that I just used to go along with things. And that's something that a lot of people do. I hear them say, I just went along with it, which is frustrating.
Right. And just asking questions and having the conversations, people need to understand that that's okay. And when I learned that meditating could be whatever I wanted it to be, and it could look however I wanted it to, then it became enjoyable. I don't have to sit for an hour in complete and utter silence, and I can do it outside and I can do it my way. Then it's enjoyable. But there are people who have rigid practices that are just not for me.
No, I agree. And it is the same for me. What I've realized is that I can really enjoy meditation if I do things like chanting, like you, when I take the dog out. That's my meditation, that lovely walk, and just being in nature and being with just a dog, because, they're just the most fun. And even when they're being really naughty, and just being in that space without having to imagine myself walking to a beach. I mean, I'm blessed. I live quite close to a beach, so I get to go there a lot. But yeah, without putting any pressure on myself. But so much of the time I used to just get really frustrated and think, why am I getting more stressed about this when this is an experience when I should be coming away from it like super chilled, and actually I'm just really frustrated or cold, or it's just not doing anything for me. And in a way, that was partly why I started to teach coaches about this, because I had that same feeling from coaching. I would be working with a coach and they'd be doing all the things that I as a coach would do and get transformational results with my clients. But I could never get those transformational results. And I always used to think, well, it must be them. It must be the program. The amount of times that I've just played the game, I've just gone along with it and thought, well, I'm definitely not going to be booking another session with them, or, all of those kind of things. And really what I realized is it wasn't actually anything to do with them, except they didn't have the knowledge and the skills and the understanding. And that's just the difference it makes, is just knowing, like we were talking about children, it's just that understanding that, okay, I'm going to have to do this in a different way. I'm going to have to operate slightly differently. I'm going to have to ask slightly different questions to get the same results. Because if you ask me to see myself 5 years down the line, when I've reached my goal, I'm not going to be able to do that. In fact, I'm going to really struggle to see myself next month. So any goals that you're making with me have got to be right in my face, really close to me, and just step by small step. Otherwise, I'm not going to get to my goal, because it would just be this non-existent thing that I can't connect with at all, because I have no way of mentally making it feel real. And how much of that motivation do we do with the whole see yourself You know, when people want to lose weight, imagine yourself standing in front of the mirror, seeing yourself at the weight that you want to be. Now feel the feeling that that's given you. And I'm A, I can't see it, and B, I can't feel it. So not going to work for me.
Vision boards. There's so many
Now,
things.
I have a thing about vision boards. So actually, vision boards can be quite good as long as I don't forget I've got one. So if I've got a vision board, it has to have words on it for me, because otherwise I'll forget what it relates to, unless it's really clear. So I tend to have, something written across an image, and then just it's got to be somewhere I can see it. So actually, mine is my screensaver on my iPad. So every time I turn my iPad on, there's my vision board. So that's my reminder of, oh, these are the things I wanted to focus on in my life. And one of the skills that I teach in my course is an open eye visualization. And that's actually looking at your just one picture on your vision board, and really focusing in on, what does that mean to you? And what would that feel like if you could feel it? And what would you be thinking? And all of those things that we do in an internal, I externalize it.
And so could you do that daily and switch the picture?
Yeah, you could. I think you have to really be clear on probably not switching that picture until you've achieved the one.
It is that way. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how I work best. But for anyone listening, that's good. That's good to know.
Yes. Yeah. And so open eye visualizations, I mean, it's not really visualizing because you're actually looking at something, but it can do the same thing for the brain that the internal visualizing can do, so long as that image that you're looking at really captures exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because the difference with doing the internal visualization, if it's, say, for example, performance, is that you would see yourself doing it. Now, unless you have done it and have pictures of yourself doing it, you're not going to get that same as you would from the internal visualization. So, for example, I, in my 50s, have decided that I want to get strong and fit. And so I have a picture of Halle Berry, because she is what I have as the idea of, she's around about the same age. She's got a really, really fit, strong body, and a really good kind of a work ethic for that I don't have. And so I can't see myself looking like her, but I can look at her and I can watch her on, one of her fitness things and say, that's what I want to get to. Now, as it happens, all I'm doing so far is just watching her. Not yet got to the put it into practice, but small steps.
I think millions of people could say the same thing. They're looking at something that they haven't put into practice yet on a board.
Yeah. It's all about, small steps and getting yourself there, and not doom scrolling, not then going down a hole. Once you watch one fitness video, the algorithms just send you down a hole, don't they? There is a risk there of doing that. I love that expression, doom scrolling. That's potentially why I might not actually be putting it into practice. I may have just answered my own question there.
What other little tips would you say to anyone listening who's going, this could be me or someone in my family, like someone in my life I might want to have a conversation with, little tips and tricks that they could add, because these are great.
Yeah, so I would say if you are watching or listening to this and you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure if I can visualize or not, come back to the question, do I just know or am I seeing? Now, it's really hard for me to describe what seeing means because I have never been able to do it. I haven't said, but aphantasia can be congenital. You can be born with it, which I think is for me. You can acquire it, so through injury and sort of brain injury and things like that, and also through trauma, through dissociation. There hasn't been a massive amount of research into that, but we know that people have the capacity to dissociate, and with dissociation can come switching off the images. We know that. And so I think that there is that element for some people to have aphantasia as a result of that. So if you have never been able to visualize, then it's about understanding, is it a question of, is it knowing or am I seeing? If you were able to visualize, then you will know that you're no longer visualizing, because it will be such a difference, that completely different way of thinking. And what I understand from people who have lost it, for them, it has been quite life-changing, because they have to relearn how to do all the things that they visually did. So, for example, one of the biggest, the most well-known about somebody who lost it was an architect who was able to see the plans in his head and the buildings and everything, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. And one would imagine that when you lose that, you have to then learn another tool to be able to do what you used to do. So that's one question always: are you seeing or are you knowing? Have you always thought that visualization was a concept and not a real thing? That's another clue. Thinking about, can you step into and relive a memory? Can you re-experience a memory? Or actually, do you just tell yourself the stories that people have told about your life, or you have told about events in your life? So for me, my childhood memories are all the stories that my mum tells about me as a child. That's it. I don't remember them, but I remember the stories. And I always say, when I talk about this, how blessed I've been to have a mum who tells wonderful stories, funny and silly stories about me as a child. I can only imagine what it must be for those people who the only stories that they have are negative stories about their lives. That must be very, very hard. So, are you actually stepping into your memories, or are you just remembering the stories? That's another question, and then another conversation to be having with people. If you're in a relationship and you are asking your partner about a significant time in your life together, and they tell you they don't remember it, strong possibility that they have SDAM, and that's why they're not remembering it. And this is another thing for relationships as well. You know, we could be thinking, God, they just don't care enough to remember this really thing, this event that was massively important. They just don't care enough to remember it. And it might not be that. They just might not remember it because they have this condition. So there's a couple of things there to kind of ask the questions. Now, the most important thing to say here is, having these conditions doesn't mean that we are ill in any way, that we are disabled in any way, that it's just a different way of thinking. And yes, it would be wonderful to be able to step into my memories. But actually, there are some memories that I have in my life that I probably would never want to step into. And so I'm pretty lucky in that respect. When traumatic things happen, I never have to replay them in my head. They never physically, I can feel them, but they don't get replayed. So there are some real positives to these conditions. So it is just a different way of being and thinking. And if you are in that relationship with somebody and you discover that, oh, they can't picture your face when you're not in the room, they can't remember the really important times in your life, and actually they've now realized that they are kind of emotionally flat, then just having those conversations and understanding that that's just who they are. It's not that they're cold. It's not that they don't care. You know, it's just the capacity to do some of the things that cause all these emotions just may not be there. And just having the conversations. There are resources on my website, which is you can get to either from the aphantasiacoach.com or aphantasiaacademy.com. So there are resources on there that you can read. There are lots of videos on my Instagram just talking about these conditions for people who can gain a bit of an understanding of them. There's also the Aphantasia Network, and they have lots of resources on theirs, and they've also got lots of the research on theirs as well. So there's lots of places you can go to kind of get a better understanding. And once you know, well, the relief of knowing that I didn't have early onset dementia, that actually I just can't access my memories. That was a thing, a real thing. And just knowing that, I need to do things slightly differently. Even things like picking the paint color with my husband, us agreeing the paint color, me going to the shop, coming back with a completely different shade of the same color because I can't repicture it in my head, silly things like that. We've developed this kind of language, my husband and I, where he'll say, he no longer says picture this. Now he will fully describe something to me. So if we're, rearranging the furniture, he needs to actually, say, right, so the chair is physically going to go there. and so that's saved us a lot of miscommunication. But it gives you an opportunity to communicate better when you have this understanding of, my brain's not working quite in the same way. And it would be lovely if I could picture where you've just put the imaginary chair, but I can't. So you're actually going to have to point to the place so I can get a frame of reference and just things like that. And when you know that you can communicate differently because you have an understanding, it makes life so much easier. It really does.
Yeah. You have to be very literal, clear. Any other little shortcuts? I would imagine I'm the queen of sticky notes. I don't go anywhere without, I would think that things like that could be very useful. And I'm just trying to think of, for some people it's alarms. I would think always having a camera or, a pen and paper, you're going to need reminders, right?
Yeah. So I do, I am also a woman of a certain age. So I think we need all of these things when we regardless. But anything that kind of is going to prompt to. So for example, a good example was I forgot to tag your email with the time and the date. And so this morning I'd convinced myself that we were meeting at 7:00 my time, the UK time. Convinced myself it was 7:00. In fact, I posted to say on my Facebook it was 7:00. And then I thought, and I forgot to set my reminder to bring your email up. And then my phone, because I had set the reminder an hour before to remind me this was happening, told me it was 6:00. And then I had to go and search for your email. And so having things that do pop up is really helpful to kind of say that, oh God, have I just forgotten? But I've got to-do lists. But the problem with the to-do list is that if it's not readily available, if I don't see it again, but I love a sticky note. Yeah.
Right. And so we all have things that we have to learn shortcuts for ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
I have someone who is so forgetful. She doesn't need one alarm in the morning to wake up. She needs one by her bed, one by the door that she has to physically get out of bed to shut off, right? Like we all have to create things to help us get through our hiccup, whatever that is. So
it's just workarounds. And I think because I have always had these conditions, I've probably developed workarounds that I'm not even conscious of. I've just grown up and adapted. Literally, I've adapted. And I was talking to one of my students on the course, and she also has these conditions. And as we were going through kind of what you would do to adapt, it was very clear that she's been doing that anyway, you know, and so we do that, we adapt anyway. But like I said, it's just a different cognitive way of being. It's just another different way of thinking. But you know, it can, like I said, it can have its advantages. There can be some challenges that can come with it, particularly, as I say, for me, the biggest issue is the memory. You know, is that not being able to step into the memories. I can very factually tell you a lot about what happened on my wedding day. I can tell you what I wore, what color my dress was. I can tell you how much my husband's suit cost. I can tell you all the very factual, semantic stuff, because that's actually where my memory sits. My memory sits with the general knowledge and the facts and figures and all of that really useless information that makes me great at a quiz, but not able to step into my memories. Whereas he can step into the memory of me walking down the aisle towards him and feel all the feelings that he was feeling. And so that not being able to do that is a little bittersweet. So yeah, but I do have a superpower. And my superpower is that if you are a visualizer, I can just give you an image in your mind that you really didn't want, and I don't have to have that.
Absolutely. And so you work with people going through this to help them learn ways to adapt and live through life, but you also work with people to be better coaches, teachers,
Yes.
educators of
Yes.
this in the world.
Yeah, that's my main focus. My main focus is actually, so when I had my breakdown and I was working with a counsellor who didn't seem to understand how my mind worked, when he kept referring to my inner Sassy, and I had to keep reminding him that I can't access my inner Sassy, I realized that actually the first thing I realized was that I needed to learn to be a counselor. So I started studying to become a counselor, and I'm kind of working my way through, because I thought, well, if I can't beat them, I'm just going to have to join them. So that was the first thing. And then my second thought was, do you know what? I just need to make sure that people like me have access to people who know how to work with them. And if there are 395 million people like me on the planet, I would love to work with all 395, but it's not physically possible. So what's the next thing I can do? I can teach people instead. So my course specifically, my program is designed for coaches, but actually later on in the year, I'm going to be working with counsellors. And I will, longer term would like to get in working with teachers.
I mean, I know teachers who would love, unfortunately, there are more who might not, but I know teachers who would say, I want to get ahead of this.
Yeah. And rightly so. And I think really good coaches, really good teachers, really good counsellors will be listening to this going, I need to know about this, because here's the thing. 20% of the population is neurodivergent. I've already said that, there are more people with aphantasia with ADHD, but actually the people with ADHD potentially have these conditions as well. And from my personal experience and the experience of the people in the forums, we don't give you our money if we think that you can't help us, whether we know that we've got these conditions or not. We get into a couple of sessions, think this just does not work for me, and we walk away. Or we go through the motions and we don't give you any more money. In fact, maybe what we do is leave you a really not very good review, because that's what I've done. And actually, it probably wasn't that person's fault. And if I could remember who it was, no, I'm joking. But there is a potential, if you are a coach or a counsellor, and in today's world, we cannot afford to be losing 20% of our business. We just can't. It's a struggle enough for anybody.
And so I want to add, ADHD, we might be catching this, but ADD,
yeah,
these are the people who are slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
because the hyperactive component is missing. And so these numbers aren't accurate. There are
No,
a lot of
exactly.
people who are not getting noticed
Yeah.
because they're sitting and paying attention and they
Yeah.
are not disruptive. And
Yeah.
so the
They're
teachers
hyper
don't
focused.
know. And so
Yeah,
these are the
exactly.
people who I'm thinking are sitting and struggling, but they're so well behaved,
Yeah,
they slip through the
exactly.
cracks.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, you know, from my point of view, it's two ways really. I want every coach, counselor, therapist to know about this so that people like me can have access to the same change that somebody who's neurotypical can get. So that's kind of the first thing. But my second thing is that, you know, to make sure that coaches aren't losing people because they can't work with them or because they struggle with them. You know, it's good for both. It's good for the client, but it's also good for the coach if they know about this as well, because they will. A couple of sessions in, it'll be, yeah. And then, you know, worse, they'll ask you for a refund. So, you know.
And remotely, if they're in the United States, will you work with people anywhere?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've actually changed my program delivery so that it is actually accessible for you anywhere in the world. So initially I was doing the program has got there's 5 modules, which teaches you about the neuroscience, what's going on in the brains of people like me, what it is, how it presents, so that if somebody comes to you, you're already ahead of the game to think, oh, this sounds like it might be. Obviously, we cannot diagnose anybody, but gives you a bit of a heads up to be able to have those conversations and say, have you heard of this? Are you able to do this? To start kind of testing those waters so that you're getting that really clear picture of your client. So there's those. And then what I was doing is I was delivering the practical sessions. Okay, so now you've learned about it. Now I'm going to teach you how you adapt and change. And I was teaching those live. But what I had some feedback was actually we really like the live sessions to be more of a Q&A and an understanding and just a talking. So what I have now is I've recorded the practical sessions. So it's accessible if you are on a completely different time zone to me, which, you know, we are, but we've made this work. You know, if you want to learn about it, it's, and I shouldn't say if, because people should. You will want to learn about this. And it's accessible regardless of what country that you're in. And it's ongoing support from me because this is important. And so every time there's a new piece of research, I do the work to interpret the new piece of research and then update the training as a result of that, because it's important to make sure that I'm, you know, fully up to date with everything as it hopefully gathers more pace. You know, I'm hoping that this becomes that rolling stone that just kind of picks up speed, or the, you know, the little tiny snowball that becomes enormous eventually. That's my dream and my passion, just to, yeah, create massive snowballs.
It's so necessary. It's so important. Thank you so much for being so open and honest. Are we forgetting anything? Any last words?
Just, I guess, yeah, I guess for people to, if they have listened to this, there is a potential. If you've been watching this or listening to this and you've realized that, oh my God, people can see other people's, you know, their faces of their loved one, and they can remember those memories, and you realize that you can't, it can be a bit of a shock. And there can be an element of feeling, oh my God, there's something wrong with me, or a feeling of sadness and grief. We talk about grief, the grief at the loss. Now, we probably haven't lost anything, but we feel like we've lost something when we realize that other people can do things we can't. Okay. Kind of human nature, really, there. And I would say, if that's you, then get onto Instagram, find me on Instagram, and just send me a message. Because one of the things that I want to do is make sure that everybody is supported if they are watching this and suddenly feeling a weight over this. For some people, it might be complete opposite. It might be, I knew there was something different about me, and now I know about it, you know. But so that's what I would just say. I'm here. I might be on a different time zone, but I'm here. So just ping me a message, and if there's any questions, I am more than happy to answer them as best I can.
The aphantasiacoachingacademy.com. And what's the Instagram?
The Aphantasia Coaching. So, sorry, it's the Aphantasia Coaching Academy on Instagram.
Okay.
The website is just Aphantasia Academy or Aphantasia Coach. So you can find me both ways.
I'll put all of that in the comments.
Thank you.
And in the show notes. Thank you so, so much. This has been so important and so necessary to everyone listening. You can also, you're in the Grief Hab community. That's for any type of a loss. If you are saying this is me and I just lost my sense of normalcy, that is a loss. So connect with Sassy, talk about it in the Grief Hab group, get the support. You're not alone. And until next time, always be ruthless.